My father barked, "Stand up, Lieutenant." I was on the kitchen floor, one hand pressed to my ribs, breath ragged, the smell of burnt meat thick in the air. The room spun, but his voice stayed sharp, same tone he used in the Army, the one that froze me as a kid. Nathan laughed behind him, calling me soldier princess, like pain was a joke we shared. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was silence, just like always. 2 hours later, an ambulance's siren echoed through our perfect neighborhood, and my father's honor started to crack. Before I tell you what happened inside that house hit like, and tell me where you're watching from, have you ever been told to stay silent when you should have spoken? When I first came back from Iraq, I told myself this was temporary, just until my ribs healed, just until I could sleep through the night without waking to phantom noise. My father, Colonel Raymond Blake, called it a chance to rebuild discipline. He greeted me at the door in full posture, boots polished, voice clipped. He didn't say welcome home. He said, "You're under my roof again, Lieutenant. You know the rules." The house looked the same. Brick walls, pine trees, leaning against the fence line, that smell of lemon cleaner sharp enough to sting your eyes. Inside, nothing felt like home. Every corner hummed with inspection. The living room was arranged like a debrief room with chairs in straight lines. The TV remote placed parallel to the edge of the table. Even the clock on the wall ticked like a metronome of control, steady, cold, absolute. Nathan was already there, leaning against the counter, smirking like he'd been waiting. "Guess the hero's back," he said. Same easy grin, same eyes that always looked for approval in my father's face before settling on me. Growing up, he was the one who followed every command, the golden child who never questioned anything. I was the one who did. That's what made me the disappointment. Mornings began before dawn. The first week home, he woke me by banging on the door with his knuckles. 500 push-ups by sunrise, he said, like it was a joke only he found funny. I tried to explain my ribs weren't fully healed. My doctor said no heavy strain, but he didn't hear it. He never did. To him, pain was weakness leaving the body. He'd say it like scripture. I'd force myself through the motions, jaw tight, every inhale sharp. When I slowed down, he'd raise his voice, reminding me that soldiers didn't whine. Nathan would watch from the porch, sipping coffee, pretending to cheer me on. "She's out of shape, Dad. Maybe you should drop her rank." I'd keep my eyes on the ground because if I looked up, he'd see the tremor in my hands. Aunt Linda came by once a week, bringing soup or small things to make it look like a visit, not a rescue mission. She'd catch my wrist when my father wasn't around, fingers brushing over the old scar near my elbow, the one from when I was 9. That was the day he built an obstacle course in the backyard and told Nathan and me to run it until we earned dinner. Nathan finished clean. I fell. The crack of bone came first, then his command. "Up, don't embarrass yourself." I washed dishes with one arm that night, the sink water clouded with soap and pain. Back then, I thought that was strength, keeping your mouth shut, pushing through. But every time I step into that kitchen now, I can still smell the metal of that night, like blood and detergent. Maybe that's why the sound of the faucet still makes my stomach twist. Because no matter how many years pass, the house never forgets. You can cover bruises, you can stitch a wound, but the silence that stays under your skin, waiting. The days started bleeding together. Sunrise orders silence. My father's footsteps echoed through the hallway like a countdown I could never stop. He had a list on the fridge, house duties he called them, but they read like a mission plan: polish, sweep, haul, repeat. Every task had a time, every mistake had a consequence. I moved like muscle memory, careful not to breathe too deep. My ribs still flared every time I reached too high or twisted too far, but saying that out loud wasn't an option. Pain had no place in this house unless it proved something. Nathan didn't help. He'd stroll in late morning, towel around his neck, gym bag slung over his shoulder, grinning like he'd already won something. "Morning, soldier princess," he'd say, grabbing a drink from the fridge. "Dad says you're slacking. Need me to supervise." He liked to provoke when our father was within earshot. It made him look loyal. I'd keep my face still, eyes down, because reacting only fed him. But inside, I could feel it, the burn behind my ribs that had nothing to do with injury. It was the kind of anger that felt dangerous, the kind that lived too long without air. One afternoon, he caught me wiping down the counters slower than usual. "You used to be tough," he said. "Now you're just fragile." He tossed a rag at my face, soft and cruel at the same time. My father didn't even glance up from the table. He didn't have to. His silence was permission enough. That night, as I scrubbed the same spot on the sink for the 10th time, my reflection in the window didn't look like me. Shoulders drawn and eyes dull, mouth set in the kind of line you get from biting back too many words. I wondered when I'd stopped speaking like a person and started responding like a soldier. The breaking point didn't come loud. It came dressed in silverware and forced smiles. My father had been preparing for weeks his celebration dinner, he called it. A few high-ranking guests from his old division were coming, including Brigadier General Helen Ames, a woman he practically worshipped. He wanted the house spotless, the food flawless, the image perfect. "Remember, Lieutenant?" he said that morning, straightening his uniform even though he was retired. "You represent this family, no excuses." By noon, my hands were raw from polishing silver. Every breath scraped like sandpaper. The doctor had warned me that overexertion could reopen the internal tear, but there was no explaining that here. "Don't make me regret letting you stay," my father said when I paused to rest, so I didn't pause again. Nathan drifted in and out of the kitchen, pretending to check progress. He leaned against the doorway, watching me carry platters heavy enough to pull at my ribs. "You sure you're not milking this injury?" he said. "You've always liked the attention." I didn't answer. The platter trembled in my hands, but I kept moving one step then another. The air smelled of garlic and heat and something burning in the oven. When the first guests arrived, laughter filled the hall, too polished to be real. I stayed behind the scenes, aligning forks, fixing details no one would notice. The ache inside me had turned sharp by then, a pulse that wouldn't quiet. Every movement sent a spark through my side, but I told myself it would be over soon. Just get through the night. Just don't make a scene. And then I heard it. My father's voice carrying from the dining room, loud, proud, introducing his children. Nathan laughed when she asked about me saying Erin's just a little dramatic these days. Thinks she's still in the war. Something inside me cracked. Not loud, not visible, but real. I set the tray down harder than I meant to. The edge of the counter caught my side, and a white-hot pain shot up my spine. I gripped the table, breathing through my teeth, fighting to stay upright. The noise in the next room faded to a hum. All I could hear was the ringing in my ears and my own pulse, fast and uneven. I looked at my reflection in the polished silver platter, flushed, shaking eyes wide, and for a second I didn't see a soldier or a daughter. I saw a trapped animal. That was the first moment I realized silence wasn't survival anymore. It was surrender, and I wasn't sure I could keep doing it much longer. From the dining room, my father called for the next course. "Move it, Lieutenant," he barked. I straightened, forcing air into my lungs, and carried the platter out anyway. Because even when everything in me screamed to stop, habit was stronger. But something had shifted. I could feel it in my bones. This time, if I fell, I wasn't getting back up for him. The night of the dinner burned into my memory like a scar that never fades. The house glowed too bright, every light turned on every window, reflecting my father's version of perfection. I carried a tray heavy enough to make my hands tremble, moving between the kitchen and the dining room like a ghost rehearsing obedience. The guests clinked glasses, their laughter too polished to be real. My father sat at the head of the table, crisp uniform pressed metals gleaming under the chandelier. Nathan lingered beside him, pouring wine, smiling wide. I knew that smile. It always meant he was about to say something that would cut. "Dad," he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Remember that story about Erin crying over a scratch? Guess the army toughened her up after all." The laughter that followed was sharp brittle. I forced a smile, though my side burned with each breath. The tray wobbled in my grip. My father didn't correct him. He just added, "Pain builds character." She needed it. The words hit harder than the injury ever did. It was the same tone he'd used my entire life, flat, absolute, unforgiving. The same tone he used when he made me wash dishes with a broken arm. My vision blurred for a moment, edges of the room softening into static. I told myself to breathe, to hold steady, to make it through the night. But my body had its own orders. My ribs screamed when I turned the world narrowing into heat and noise. Someone laughed again. Then the floor tilted. The tray slipped. Silver and glass shattered across the rug, and the sound ripped through the room like gunfire. I dropped to one knee trying to breathe, but nothing came. My chest locked. The air felt thick, cruel. I heard my father's voice before I saw his face. "Get up, Lieutenant." I couldn't. "Do not embarrass this family." I heard the scrape of his chair, the hush that fell over the guests, the clink of a glass set down too slowly, every sound sharp as shrapnel. Then another voice cut through, steady, low, unfamiliar, in this house. "Don't, Dr. Cole Everett." I hadn't seen him since deployment. He was across the table one moment, beside me the next. "She needs help," he said, voice calm, but loud enough for everyone to hear. My father stiffened. "She's fine. She's dramatizing again." Cole didn't move away. Her breathing shallow. "She's in distress. Call an ambulance." For the first time that night, someone looked at me. Really looked. The guests shifted uneasy. Nathan muttered something under his breath, but no one laughed now. Cole placed a hand near my shoulder, careful not to touch. "Aaron, when did the pain start?" I tried to answer, but all I managed was a whisper. It never stopped. That was enough. He signaled someone for help, voice cutting through the chaos like a command. "Call 911, now." My father's face turned crimson. "You are making a spectacle." "This is my house." Cole spun on him, eyes sharp. "Then you should have taken better care of what's in it." The room froze. The weight of his words hung heavy, undeniable. I remember the sirens before I remember standing. The blur of EMT uniforms, the cold press of oxygen against my lips. My father's voice kept echoing something about family matters and respect, but no one listened to him anymore. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught Nathan's expression, pale, empty, stripped of the smugness he always wore. My father stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. For once he had no command to give. Through the haze of pain, I saw Aunt Linda at the doorway. She wasn't crying. She just nodded once, like she'd been waiting for this moment too long. In the ambulance, I finally let the tears come. Not from pain, but from the quiet realization that for the first time in my life, silence didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. I closed my eyes and thought, maybe this isn't the end of the war. Maybe it's the start of one I can finally win. The hospital lights were too white, too clean, like they were trying to bleach the past right off my skin. I lay still, ribs bandaged tight, every breath pulling like thread through torn fabric. Machines hummed a rhythm I didn't recognize, softer than orders, freer than silence. For the first time in months, no one was telling me to stand up. Aunt Linda showed up before sunrise. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She stood by the bed, arms crossed, and said, "You're not going back there." I tried to argue. Habit. "It's fine," I whispered. He didn't mean her eyes cut through me like a scalpel. "Stop protecting him, Aaron. He doesn't need protection. You do." She dropped a file on the tray table, hospital scans. Dr. Cole's report, a printed transcript from the emergency dispatch. Every page proof that what happened wasn't weakness, it was abuse. She leaned in close. "He's used your silence like armor for years. You think it makes you strong. It only keeps him safe." Those words landed harder than any wound. For a long moment, I couldn't meet her eyes, because deep down, I knew she was right. 2 days later, military police came to take my statement. Cole stood beside me the whole time, quiet but steady, like a wall that wouldn't move, even when I shook. My voice trembled through the first few sentences, then steadied. Once I started, it wouldn't stop. I told them about the drills before sunrise, the broken bone when I was 9, the way he used ranks like shackles. I told them about the night I collapsed, the laughter, the command to get up. When it was done, I expected to feel hollow. Instead, I felt lighter, like a weight I'd carried so long had finally named itself. The hearing came fast, too fast. My father pulled every string he had, left every favor from old comrades. But Aunt Linda was relentless. She gathered records, witness statements, even a voicemail he'd left her after the ambulance came. She's exaggerating again. Tell her to toughen up. The day of the trial, I wore my uniform. Not for him, but for me, for the girl who washed dishes with a fractured arm, for the woman who still believed pain had to be hidden to be respected. The room smelled like paper and dust. Officers sat in a row, medals shining faces blank. My father stood across from me, back straight, chin high, still pretending he was untouchable. Nathan sat behind him, jaw tight, avoiding my gaze. Dr. Cole testified first. His voice was clinical, detached, every word a strike. He described my breathing pattern, the internal bleeding on the scan, the risk of collapse. His report left no space for denial. Then Aunt Linda took the stand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid out the history like a slow March childhood injuries school reports neighbors who heard yelling. Each piece of paper was a nail sealing a coffin made of pride. When she finished, the prosecutor played the voicemail. My father's voice filled the room, sharp, commanding, cruel. Then Nathan's laughing in the background. No one spoke. When it was my turn, my hands shook as I stood. The ribs still ached under the uniform, but the pain kept me grounded. I looked at the panel, then at him. I've spent my whole life mistaking silence for strength, I said. I thought if I didn't complain, I'd earn his respect. I thought endurance meant honor. But it didn't make me strong. It made me invisible. I told them about the house, the lemon cleaner, the lists on the fridge, the nights I stayed awake just to breathe without being told how. My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The truth was louder than any shouting. When I finished, I sat down and didn't look away. For once, I wanted him to feel what it was like to be seen. The verdict came an hour later. Colonel Raymond Blake, guilty of misconduct, abuse, and endangerment, rank revoked, pension frozen, banned from any future military events. Nathan's role as his accomplice didn't go unnoticed. His pending promotion was suspended indefinitely. My father didn't speak. His eyes met mine once, just once, and for the first time he looked small. The man who'd built his life on control couldn't control the truth. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, like it belonged to me again. The pine trees swayed under the winter sun, and for the first time in years, I didn't straighten my posture out of habit. I just breathed. Aunt Linda put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it?" she said softly. "No," I said. "We did." Cole joined us, a faint smile breaking through his usual composure. "You should know," he said, "your statement's already making waves. Others are coming forward." That hit me harder than the verdict, because suddenly I understood this wasn't just about my father. It was about every voice that had been ordered to stay silent. That night, I stood by my apartment window overlooking Fort Banner, watching the base lights flicker in the distance. I thought about the little girl scrubbing dishes with her arm in a sling, about the soldier who mistook obedience for survival, about the woman who finally learned that truth doesn't need permission. The war was over. But something new had started, something worth fighting for. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The auditorium was packed, rows of uniforms and silent faces reflecting the stage lights. I stood behind the podium palms, damp against the paper I wasn't sure I'd even need. The insignia on my jacket felt lighter now, no longer a badge of obedience, but proof that I'd survived something bigger than war. I started simply. For a long time, I thought silence was strength. A few heads nodded like they already knew that kind of quiet. I was raised to believe that pain was proof of discipline. I continued, voice steady, that if I didn't flinch, if I didn't speak, I'd be respected. But silence doesn't protect you. It protects the people who hurt you. The room stayed still, the air thick with recognition. Somewhere in the back, someone shifted, a uniform creaked, a throat caught on breath. I told them about that night, the broken plate, the command to stand, the voice that finally said, "Don't." I told them how speaking up didn't make me weak. It made me whole. As I spoke, I saw the ripple move through the crowd. Men and women who had learned the same lessons I had, bury it, swallow it, call it strength. I watched their faces soften, not with pity, but understanding. I used to think survival meant staying quiet, I said. Now I know survival is speaking when they tell you not to. The applause started slow, almost uncertain, then grew into something fierce and real. I didn't bow. I didn't smile. I just stood there and let it wash over me. When it ended, I looked into the camera streaming live for the base channel. If you've ever been told to stay silent, I said don't. Someone out there needs to hear you. And as the crowd rose, I realized the war inside me had finally gone quiet. The applause faded, but no one left. They just stood there watching. I took one more breath, the kind that finally felt mine, and looked straight into the camera. If you've ever been told to stay silent, I said don't. Someone out there needs to hear you. I paused, then added softer. And if this story sounds even a little like yours, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Your story might be the one that reminds someone else they're not alone. I let that sit for a moment, then smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Hit subscribe if you believe every voice deserves to be heard, because sometimes speaking up isn't rebellion, it's survival. The lights dimmed, and for the first time, the quiet didn't scare me. It felt earned.